lot of superfoods just don't live up to the hype. They seem promising today, and then they don't withstand the test of time and they quietly fade away. But what if you were to look back throughout history and find the absolute most potent and strongest superfoods from the land and the sea and combine those together? Not only that, but if you look back through history, there are certain ingredients and substances that ancient cultures have prized for hundreds, if not thousands of years. One of those is a supplement favorite of mine called Shilajit. It's got all kinds of bioactives in it and is a nutrient powerhouse, as well as a natural detoxification agent and so much more. You can only collect this substance at very high elevations of, say, 16,000 feet plus. Cultures around the world have used it for millennia, and it's actually used in 20 different Ayurvedic remedies, as well as 24 modern proprietary drugs. Then we have the substances coming from the sea. It's well documented that certain waters can be healing. And what if those same healing constituents were available to you? Well, the trace mineral rich marine plasma is one such example. Then we have monoatomic gold and Ormus. These are some substances I haven't yet discussed on the show, so I'm excited to be diving into the science, the benefits, and a whole lot more today. And particularly the synergy you get when you combine them together. Our guest this week is David Reid. He's a bioharmonizer who embarked on a life-changing journey to find purpose, and he unlocked ancient secrets buried deep in the Earth's past. Over the years, he traveled to various places around the world, including Mexico, Hawaii, Machu Picchu, Egypt, Mount Shasta, the Himalayas, Tibet, Jerusalem, and many more. David's quest led him to discover and create a company called Manna, an all-in-one supplement made from natural ingredients, including some of the real superfoods that I just mentioned. Through his experiences and research, he developed the unique formula and methodology that went into Manna, combining elements from the highest and lowest places on Earth to give you the broadest spectrum of nutritional benefits. And that's what he's currently doing. David is now still working on projects related to maximizing health and vitality. You can find the show notes and everything we discuss at mindbodypeak.com/150. Yes, Manna is definitely one of the more expensive supplements I use, but because it's able to amplify just how much of everything else you consume, whether food or supplement, and it contains a great source of bioavailable trace minerals and much more. This is one of those you might want to just try for yourself for a month and see if it's worth it. To lessen the burden a bit, David has generously given us the code URBAN, which will save you 10% on your order. A link to his website will be in the show notes, or you can just head to Manna Vitality, MANNA Vitality.com. If you find this interesting, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or to tag me on social media and let me know your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this episode and get as much out of it as we did. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, David Reid. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here.
Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation because today we're going to be discussing several topics that I've never discussed on the show before, one of which I've briefly mentioned, but never really gone deep into the science and the benefits of. But before we get started, I'm curious, what are the unusual non-negotiables you've done so far today for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony?
Yeah, great question. I mean, for me, it always comes back to nature and the elements. So just doing the really simple things, getting as much sleep as possible, lots of rest, getting out in natural light, getting for a swim in the ocean or, a waterfall. So the natural water or ocean water, and then doing some exercise as well. And that can be as simple as going for a walk in the sunshine and then having a swim at the beach. So just before we started, I mentioned I went for a swim already because it's 7:30 at the moment in the morning in Australia. So yeah, that's often the way I'll start the morning is just go for a walk at around 5 or 6 a.m. have a swim at the beach, and then you're getting that natural light, you're getting the exercise, and you're getting all of those beautiful minerals as well. And then I start the day as well with a glass of structured and charged water that I'll add Manna into. So that really sets me up for the day. Obviously, running a business, it can be quite busy. I get about 400 or 500 messages a day. Only about 20% of those I've got to respond to. So yeah, just getting that done early in the morning as far as the exercise and having that time in nature, just really puts me in a space of gratitude, and also kind of hydrates the body and gets me focused for the day so that I can deal with the creative side and the operational side, and then the relationship side of working with all the different internal and external stakeholders.
Well, I don't think anything you mentioned there is too unusual, or at least not on this show. But I am envious that you have that natural body of water that you can take a plunge into at the end of your walk, because my routine is very similar to yours, pretty close to the first thing in the morning after I do some meditation and I hydrate a little bit. Then I will go on my walk. I will ground. I'll do some breath work. I will not be able to take a nice dip, but you mentioned that when you go in the water, part of the reason for you is minerals. And I think a lot of people think of sunlight. They might think of negative ions, perhaps they're earthing or grounding. But you mentioned minerals, and I want to dig into that because that is going to be a lot of what we talk about today. Why are you so into minerals?
Well, I guess from my journey of defragging from the corporate world and going back into nature, I really connected deeply with the elements. And with the elements, I mean predominantly the sun and water and the earth being the minerals. And really the sun and the water being the ocean is the parents of the minerals. You know, salt, as an example, there's 12 main salts, and salt really is crystallized light, or it's like being dehydrated by the sun and comes from the ocean. So when I say the sun and the ocean are really the parents of salts and minerals, that's why I say that. And so the minerals are really the building blocks of the physical world, the entire material world. And an extension of that is life and biology. So minerals and everything on the periodic table are the building blocks of life and biology. And that is another way of saying that is that's the elements or the minerals. And so many of those minerals are no longer in our food because they're no longer in our soils anymore. So it's really important that we supplement those, because if we're depleted in our mineral composition or those building blocks, there's going to be some aspect of our expression which is compromised. And that can obviously lead to, disharmony in the body. There was actually a Nobel Prize winner last century, Linus Pauling, and he famously claimed that a lack of minerals in the body can be traced back to all disease in the body. So again, without those building blocks, because all the other nutrients are made from those too, like all your vitamins, all your amino acids, all your proteins, they're all made from those building blocks. So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I think that's an underlooked role and reason that minerals are so important. Because like when we talk about nutrients that are essential for the body, it's like, okay, we need our proteins, which are really just amino acids. Then we need our vitamins and then fish oil and all these things. And sometimes minerals are like an afterthought. They come after vitamins and minerals. But you just said that they are the building blocks for so much else in the body.
yeah, so if we were to go to, the first principles thinking has become like a trend in the last decade. And some of our great leaders and entrepreneurs think first principles with builders like an Elon Musk when it comes to a Tesla factory or just in his way of thinking, right? If we were to go to first principles of nutrition, what we would find is atoms. And what atoms are is minerals or elements on the periodic table. Like the only difference between one element and another element is the amount of protons and electrons in the atom. So I guess we go from the subatomic world into the atomic world. And first principles of nutrition is all of those mineral expressions on the periodic table. And that's what we're talking about here. It's the building blocks for everything else. So to your point, your proteins, your vitamins, your fats, anything you can think of is made from those building blocks. It's almost like Tetris, right? Like those building blocks are there and you need a certain combination of those building blocks or those Tetris blocks to produce a vitamin or to produce a molecule, if you will. So molecules are only combinations of the building blocks. And I mean, it's also an honor to the intelligence of the body, which we believe is the most intelligent technology in the universe. So if we give the body access to those building blocks, it's intelligent enough to take what it needs and actually produce a lot of those compounds and molecules. Our current conditioning doesn't necessarily allow for that. We still need proteins, vitamins. Like science says that we can't produce vitamins internally, but new science is showing that we absolutely can. Once we have access to these building blocks, our body can produce them internally. So our biological systems are changing along with everything else on the planet right now. And the greatest honor we can give our body from a nutritional perspective is to give it the minerals, because it is the building blocks of everything else.
You mentioned Linus Pauling earlier, and I think most people know of him, if they know of him, as the vitamin C guy, because that's what I knew him as. Then I was writing a post on minerals and trace minerals, and I came across that exact same quote that you just mentioned, that he viewed mineral deficiency as a root cause of all disease. And why don't we know these types of things? Like, how come so many times throughout history, different scientists and researchers have emphasized the importance of minerals and remineralization of our bodies, yet it's still an afterthought?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just science and marketing. We've been so focused, like you said, on proteins, amino acids, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, without actually thinking, what are they made from? Like, what's the source of those? And I guess minerals are so abundant and they're so available that it's not, from a marketing perspective, it's not the best thing to be sharing with people, right? Like, you can go for a swim in the ocean and access a lot of the minerals for free that you can otherwise purchase. So I think there's multiple layers to the science. I mean, there was another beautiful doctor last century, Renee Quinton, who the Quinton ocean plasma is kind of birthed from his research, and he was curing tens of thousands of people throughout Egypt and France simply with giving them 10 mils of ocean water several times a day, which is amazing. And it totally makes sense because they're getting all of that, all of those minerals that they require again. And that's a big part of what we do at Manna as well, is have access to those minerals from the plant world and the ocean world. And that's why we're so passionate about it. It is such a great opportunity for the human body at the moment to come back online, recognizing that we're giving those minerals back to the body physically, but we're also electromagnetic beings. So, a huge part of minerals is conductivity. It's the old science experiment that most of us did at school, right? If we have distilled water and put a battery in there and a light bulb, there's no charge. The light bulb won't turn on. But as soon as we add minerals, the light bulb turns on because there's conductivity in the water. So our body being 99% water by molecular count. And a lot of people are now aware that, to drink a lot of water each day and stay hydrated. But the big missing link again is we're not water beings, we're saltwater beings. So it's so important. And all of our functions, all of our cellular functions are based around mineral charge and cell membrane potential. It's really, really important that we not just stay hydrated, but we also stay mineralized.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Rene Quinton too, because he was the one who made me realize there's more to minerals than meets the eye. Didn't he have some kind of experiment or practice he did during one of the world wars where he would actually transfuse soldiers when they ran out of blood with minerals and they did just fine?
Yeah, there's a beautiful website set up almost in reverence of Rene and several other doctors that have done amazing things with ocean water or ocean plasma. And it's simply called oceanplasma.org. It's a great website. It shows dozens of clinical studies based around what you just said.
You also mentioned that we can bathe in certain bodies of natural water and get minerals. Can we do that anywhere, or does it need to be in very specific, pristine environments?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the cleaner, the better. The ocean is the most structured and charged body of water on the planet. I was just talking with my partner about it this morning as we were walking along the water, and, we could see hundreds of waves. And I don't know if you're aware, but in every single wave, there's literally thousands of vortexes going forward in the wave. There's some beautiful photography of this now. And all of those vortexes are cleaning and restructuring the oceans. And if we think how many waves are taking place in the ocean right now, yeah, it would be billions. Every single beach on the planet has waves breaking. And so the movement from the tides from the moon is creating these vortices and then micro vortices that's keeping the oceans structured and pristine. When we have massive storms here in Australia, the water runs down the rivers into the ocean. The oceans turn brown from all of the wash from the rivers. But you only have to wait like 2 or 3 days, and the waves, they clean it all up again, and it turns into that pristine aqua and blue. So yeah, the ocean kind of has this natural way of staying charged and pristine. So I always recommend getting in the ocean as much as possible. And yeah, there's other amazing expressions on the planet. A really good one is the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is amazing because it has all these anomalies. But from a mineral composition perspective, there's nothing else like it on the planet. It's really high in magnesium, potassium, sulfur, and calcium, whereas the ocean is, 95% sodium chloride. So the beautiful thing with getting in the Dead Sea, and a lot of people, tens of thousands of people travel there every year that have all kind of ailments. And when they go there, the ailments go away. And it's almost like a resurrection or a rebirthing of the biological system just by getting in the Dead Sea and floating and bathing and allowing that exchange. There's something in the center of our cells that's not talked about often called deep water. And that is like water that's right in the center of our cells that it doesn't necessarily feel safe to release the toxins because the mineral environment that it requires is not present. So again, it's that body's intelligence. But within the Dead Sea, because the minerals outside of the body are so abundant, the body actually feels safe enough to let go of that deep water and have that exchange take place. So that's just kind of my theory of why so many people have these massive transformations and why the Dead Sea has been revered for thousands of years of people having these very amazing resurrections and incredible experiences there. Actually, about 35 BC, Cleopatra went to a place called Engedi at the Dead Sea where the Essenes were living, and she actually got Mark Antony, her partner at the time, to trade with King Herod, who was in charge of the whole area, so that she could own that piece of land because she fell in love with the minerals and learnt from the Essenes the power of the minerals. And so she ended up, Mark Antony did the trade with King Herod, and she ended up with that area of land for the minerals.
Incredible. How fast does this all work? If I was to go to the Dead Sea now and say I had some nagging symptoms or ailments, would I expect relief from the moment I touch the water, the next day, a week later, a year later?
Yeah, so I would say if you were to get in the sea every day, 20 minutes every day for 2 weeks, your body would go through a resurrection process. And the reason I say that so confidently is I slept on the bank of the Dead Sea for 88 nights, and I observed people go through this process multiple times. And not many people would actually devote 2 weeks to being there. Most people, it was just a day or 3. But the people that actually devoted to getting in that water for 2 weeks was actually a gentleman who'd lived at the sea. He was the person that lived closest to the sea, and he had been there a long time. He recommended that. And I did it, and I observed multiple other people did it, and almost shed a layer of skin like a snake. And there was also black mud, which was amazing. There was a live black mud pool that was still active right next to where I was sleeping. And on the other side was hot springs. And they were amazing as well because they're one of a kind, because they're like a natural float tank, but a float tank, again, made from magnesium, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and all the other trace minerals in a smaller ratio. And plus some of them were like the same temperature as the body, which in Celsius is about 38.5 degrees. So it was this unique experience of being able to be weightless, be in water the same temperature as the body, but this mineral-rich soup or nectar, if you will, that was allowing that exchange again with parts of the body that we wouldn't usually get that exchange. So, yeah, it's a long answer to your question, but I feel like 20 minutes a day for 2 weeks would have a massive impact on anybody.
I'm struck by how short of a time that is too, in terms of like the duration, the 2 weeks, and then also only 20 minutes at a time. And I'm sure you can't really like dissociate and break down the individual components of like what it is. If it's the minerals, it's the sunlight, it's the ground, if it's the vortexing and structuring of the water, if it's the synergy of all of them, that's my opinion, most likely what it is. It's all the different factors at once. I'm thinking about like a cheap budget way to do this at home, if there is one, but it doesn't seem possible if we're getting municipal tap water and it's running through pipes and then coming up into a bathtub. Even if we remineralize it, it probably is not going to have the same restorative effect.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's multiple things going on over there. Even the fact that it's the lowest place on Earth means it has a totally different atmosphere. And even the ions in the air. So when I first started sleeping by the sea, it was January, which is the middle of winter in Jerusalem or at the Dead Sea. And so it was quite cold. So I was having fires at night, and the flames to the fire were all different colors that I'd never seen before because of the minerals in the air. There's a lot of other things going on there that would be really powerful, that would be tricky to replicate. However, we're doing our best by getting deep water off Tasmania, and we put the ocean plasma that we get through a 3-year solar evaporation process. And the reason for that and the end result of that, when we test the water in laboratory, is it matches up very closely with what the Dead Sea ocean plasma is like. So we're dropping that ratio of sodium chloride, and we're lifting the ratio of those other important minerals for the body, like magnesium, potassium, calcium, sulfur. They're really important, and they're the ones we see that our body's depleted in. sulfur is a huge one. Like sulfur is the third most abundant mineral in the body. You don't hear people talk about it so much. It's not as popular as magnesium and potassium. And sodium is really important as well. Like sodium's kind of been shunned upon in the 80s and 90s and given a bad name, which still has a hangover today. But it's responsible for every single one of our cellular processes.
It's incredible how that goes. And I read a book a while back called The Salt Fix, and the authors go through and they document how virtually everything we attribute to too much sodium chloride intake, too much salt intake, is actually usually the opposite. It's caused by insufficient. And if you're consuming high quality, unrefined salt, that's very different than bleached and iodized and refined white table salt that comes and is just as high in chemicals as it is, if not higher, than the other minerals and trace minerals.
Yeah, and you brought up a really beautiful point, Nick, that's the most important thing is if you're getting natural salt, like natural sea salt, it's going to be so much better than anything that's been mined or refined.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that there are 12 salts. What did you mean by that?
Within the periodic table, there's 12 different salts. We really only kind of talk about those main six that I've referred to several times, which is magnesium, potassium, sulfur, calcium, sodium, and your chlorides. So it's like the first six. And then there's like another, there's like a layer one of another six. And each of those salts gets a little bit more esoteric, but they actually relate to astrology as well. So they relate to layers of the zodiac. And each of those salts, again, is really crystallized light. So it's providing like the charge for our system and the electromagnetic conductivity for our system, which doesn't get spoken about too often, but it's just as important as the physical component. And, the precious metals are the same. So gold is really crystallized light in a metallic form.
Can you explain what you mean by this, by crystallized light? I'm trying to wrap my head around it without going down too much of a rabbit hole. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, well, let's use the example of salt that we all know. What's the parents of that again? Like, how is salt at the beach or at the Dead Sea made? So the source material of salt is seawater. And then as the seawater dehydrates from the sun, so the sun shining on the water turns the water into a salt crystal. Salt is a crystal. So it's crystallized light.
Gotcha. But what about the other salts that are non-sea salts, like say Himalayan or other like mountain salts?
It's still dehydrated from the sun. So the only way something can lose moisture is from evaporation or heat. And all evaporation and heat in our solar system ultimately comes from the sun. Like all life comes from the sun. The sun's actually the source of everything. So I guess it's just a first principles way of approaching it again. Is it's like the ultimate way of describing salt is crystallized light. There's nothing else it can be. It's a crystal that comes from the sun.
I've also heard that ocean plasma, I'd like you to define what plasma is also, because that's another word that I think would be helpful to understand exactly what it means. But I've heard that ocean plasma contains every element on the periodic table.
So there's multiple ways to define what plasma is. I mean, ultimately, plasma is really fire and something that is transforming matter from one state to another state. In the example of ocean plasma, I think of ocean plasma as like a concentrated form of ocean water. And like, if I go to the Dead Sea again, it's an amazing example because that water it's almost in between a water and an oil. I actually call it like a fourth or fifth phase of water because the properties of it are so different to water-based substances. Like I mix Dead Sea water with oils and it just goes straight in and forms a serum. You just put it in your hand, a few drops of each. Whereas if you tried to do that with water, they wouldn't mix. So it's like a plasma. It has different properties to normal water. And, the process that we do with our ocean water, putting it through that 3-year solar evaporation process, it ends up as a plasma as well. So it's like this thick, syrupy solution that then I would say has different phases to water. And one example of that, it's like a fuel. It's almost like a fuel. But what I mean by different, it has different properties is it mixes with oil, which water's not supposed to do, right? And it doesn't freeze. So it has different properties that there's not much data on yet.
And so this ocean plasma naturally exists in certain hotspots around the world. But if I just go out and scoop up a cup of seawater, it's not going to necessarily be dominant in ocean plasma.
Correct. Yeah. And, some people would call regular ocean water ocean plasma. I don't really call it ocean plasma until it's gone into those different phases. And an interesting expression of ocean plasma, which is hard to get, but I believe is some of the best nutrients on the planet, is actually like at the sea floor, in particular areas where there's volcanic activity, and you get that nutrient-rich, highly concentrated ocean plasma like coming out of the Earth's crust. And that's actually the source of like huge blooms that take place across the planet because all that phytoplankton starts feeding off it. Then your bait fish come in, then your bigger fish come in, and you can actually see it in like time lapses on satellites now. And it spawns from those releases in the Earth's crust, and those releases potentially it's the source of life. Like potentially that is the most nutrient-rich fluid on the planet.
And it's barely been tapped into at all, if it has.
It has. I was actually, it barely has, but it has. And I was talking to a pretty advanced physicist at dinner with my business partner, Brad McDonnell, just last week. And he was saying that he was actually getting that volcanic ocean plasma from the ocean floor. They were putting it in drums, and the drums were gaining weight. So they realized that they were playing with something that they didn't know too much about, and they actually went and put the water back into the ocean because they got he was like he's a really advanced physicist, and it freaked him out.
Clearly. Especially when you're playing with a substance that has very little, if any, documentation around. Why do you put it through a 3-year process? I'm sure some people would be hearing this and think that, okay, use the wonders of modern technology and heat the substance so that it evaporates and condenses the 3-year period down to 3 minutes or 3 hours.
Yeah, it's a good question. And when I say 3 years, it's an approximation. It depends on atmospheric conditions and the weather patterns during that time. The quickest we've been able to do it is in about 9 months. And then the longest it's taken is like 4 or 5 years. I guess it's a natural process that was handed down from a very beautiful man locally here who was an alchemist who had this technique, and he was curing all kinds of people. He was similar to like a modern day Rene Quinton, and he's left his body now from old age. However, he only passed that alchemical formula of readjusting the minerals onto a couple of people. And one of those works with us. And so we have access to that way of doing it. I guess we look at the elements as being alive and living. So we're in deep reverence for those minerals being available to us and the process of working with the sun. Again, to dehydrate those mineral and adjust those mineral ratios over time. So I'm sure we could utilize modern day technology to speed that up. We've actually been doing that process for 20 years. And so it's something that we know and feel comfortable with and are passionate about the end result, that we don't really need to speed that up or change the process.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And then you also hinted at gold. What is the relation that you have with gold and this whole concoction that you've whipped up?
Yeah, gold is it's the highest frequency metal on the planet. It's in all of our phones and computers in very small amounts for a very specific reason, because it is the best substance on the planet for conductivity. And again, if we think about our body as a conductor, if we can get small amounts of gold in our circuitry, then we're going to become superconductive. And once we get that cell membrane potential or that superconductivity up to a certain frequency, basically we're immune from environmentally caused illness and disease. And we're able to measure that now. Yeah. So let's say we can measure cell membrane potential. We're doing a clinical study on this year. But let's say, just for layman's terms, if we can have a reading between 0 and 10 for cell membrane potential, or phase angle is another way of saying it. Once you're at 7 or above, we've never found anybody to have any disease in the body. If you're below 7, then you're susceptible to disease. And if you're below 4, you will have disease, or at least it will be in the stage of manifesting. And once we get enough gold into our biology, then we're at 7 or above with the cell membrane potential. So that's how powerful it is. It's actually increasing the quotient of light and increasing our biological frequency so that we are immune from the lower frequencies. And that's where illness and disease is. It's like the frequency in megahertz of our brain, as an example, is like 80 to 90 for like a healthy brain that doesn't have brain damage and is doing some meditation. And then like if our body is at 50, like if we've got the flu, we're at like 50 megahertz. If we have cancer, we're at like 35 or 40 megahertz. Rose oil, as an example, is at like 320 megahertz. And two opposing frequencies can't coexist. So if we're putting gold into the body and it's raising that megahertz frequency, it's going to be those lower ones can't be there as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so, okay, so if I didn't have any access to gold, but I do like the basic things of health and wellness, I'm going to be increasing my cell membrane potential in a different way. And it might be slower, it might be much more difficult and take a lot more work, but I can go from a 4 to a 6 to an 8 that way also. But if I introduced gold, then I could get better results from doing those things. Or if I wasn't able to do those things for whatever reason, I could keep working my way up towards optimal.
Exactly. Yeah. Gold's a bit of an extreme example, to be fair. It's a purification process. And so there's multiple ways to go through that purification process. There's eating healthier, higher frequency foods. There's getting out into nature. There's sun gazing. There's fasting. There's getting the right micronutrients, which is what Manna's all about, which is Shilajit and your Ormus, because Ormus is also getting those minerals and putting them into higher spin states or higher frequencies. And then gold's really like the supreme nutrient or the grand catalyst that that again, our technology shows us. If we're going to have the best technology, we don't compromise on what's in it, and we'll put gold in very critical components so that we have the best sound or the best visual or the best conductivity, if you will. And it's important to get the right gold as well. So the gold that we use in Manna Gold is pure gold. It's 24 karat gold, and it goes through a process of getting it down to a very specific nanometer size, which is between 50 and 30 nanometers. And the reason for that is it can then pass through the blood-brain barrier and get into the amygdala, which is very specific. So for a substance to pass through the blood-brain barrier, it has to be the right size, has to have the right charge, has to be the right substance, and it has to be the right geometry. And so gold in that nanometer size ticks all of those boxes. And once it goes through the blood-brain barrier, lodges into the amygdala, then that frequency of the gold can go throughout the entire central nervous system and make its way out to the cellular network.
And this is all from orally ingesting gold. You wouldn't apply it topically or wear it on a necklace or put it on your head or anything.
Yeah, this is from ingesting it. And this isn't this. So we have 10,000 parts per million of 24 karat gold in Manna Gold that can be tested in laboratory. And it's not a foreign process to the body. So actually our sexual fluids are designed to produce nanoparticles of gold. However, again, if our body is not purified enough, it will have forgotten how to do that process. Like if there's too many dense frequencies in it, like from alcohol or drugs, as an example, the body just won't produce those nanoparticles of gold. However, people that have gone through a purification process, and there's people in our family that have, and they're able to actually produce the gold internally, have it go up their spinal column and into their pineal gland, and they're able to self-sustain from that gold and from light. So again, it's part of the biological transformation that we're going through. But the gold that we have is also entrained to remind the body that it can also produce the gold, and it's entrained to remind the cells that they can also be self-sustainable from light. So it's all about increasing the light quotient within the body. And again, the body's intelligent enough to realize when we get to a certain light quotient, and then it goes through an internal process of change.
Yeah, whenever I talk to people who are very steeped in the natural health world, it seems like sunlight and water always come up, and water as a means of sending, receiving, and transmitting information. And therefore, if you enhance your ability to do that with something like gold, then you'll be getting a bunch of like benefits that are hard to quantify and even qualify because it's so widespread.
Yeah, and I would add minerals to that. So it's all about sunlight, water, and minerals.
I view minerals as part of the water. They should be part of the water at least.
However, it is important to mention it because so many people are stripping the minerals out of their water because they live in the cities, they put their water through a machine, and I see it as turning into hungry water. So if we drink water that doesn't have enough minerals, nature's always seeking balance. So we drink that water, it will actually pull the minerals from our body to become balanced again.
No, it's so true. I have that exact issue. I'm in Austin. I have a reverse osmosis water filter. I always make sure that I remineralize it. And I created a video on YouTube about the dangers of not remineralizing your water and just drinking it out of that. And some of the comments I got were people saying, well, you get plenty of minerals from your diet. It's not going to strip it out of your bones or tissues or anything because you're already consuming enough minerals as is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a study out by the US Department of Agriculture that shows in the last 100 years, we've lost 80% of the minerals in our food. So that's like alarm bells, right? when we know that we require those minerals for our bodies to function correctly and not be compromised. So again, it's back to those building blocks of our blood, our fluids, our biology are missing from our foods. So, it's really important to make sure we get them, and that then our body can grab those and utilize them as it needs. It's like, that's where we when we zoom in on Mana, we really see it as like fertilizer for the blood, and also providing that charge for the cells. And once we're doing that, then, it's increasing that cell membrane potential as well. So it's going to have a huge impact on all aspects of our life.
And also with our modern lifestyles and exposures to man-made stressors and electromagnetic, electrobiomagnetic stressors like EMFs and that kind of stuff, that's going to increase our mineral burn rate, which exacerbates the issue even further. So it's like you want to be doing everything you can to get as much minerals from diet, and then also to add in exogenous minerals from different sources, because even unless you're growing your food in your backyard and you're really tending to the soil and doing it biodynamically and checking all the boxes, and that's your full-time job, you're probably not going to be getting enough for your lifestyle. And then you also mentioned Ormus. That's another one that I've never mentioned on this show, and I think it'll be fun to explore with you.
Yeah, Ormus is a fascinating substance. I first came across it when I visited Egypt over a decade ago. And I was actually given a document on 3 different ways to produce Ormus back then. The 3 different ways were from seawater, from dead seawater, and from gold. So when I returned from Egypt back to Byron Bay in Australia, I'd turned my place into a laboratory, and within a month, I'd produced Ormus from those 3 different source materials. I started sharing them with people, and they were getting all kinds of interesting experiences and feedback. And so I thought, I need to learn more about this and find out what I was doing. So at the time, I sought out the 2 experts on the planet. They were David Hudson and Barry Carter. And I actually went and stayed with Barry Carter for 10 days at his house in Idaho, Baker City, Idaho. And that was really precious. Barry was known as the librarian of Ormus on the planet for 30 years. So he'd really been like, taking information and researching Ormus and talking to all of these underground alchemists and doing research on sacred text. And he had a storehouse of information. He'd really devoted his life to it. His saying was Ormus was the greatest scientific discovery of our time. He was really passionate about it. And at the end of that 10 days, he gave me 1.4 terabytes of information, which was his life's work on Ormus. It was a beautiful learning process, and really it is current elements that we know of on the periodic table, predominantly precious metals and salts, funny enough, in other energetic states or other spin rates. So it's either current elements in different states or spin rates, or new elements that we don't have the technology to detect yet. And it's debatable which one of the 2 it is. It's kind of in some ways saying the same thing. Yeah, it's Ormus is known in Hebrew as Manna, and it's known in Egypt as Mufkat. There's lots of the temples. There's hieroglyphs referring to this white powder gold, or that was used by like the kings and pharaohs to elevate their consciousness and commune with the gods and reach like this godlike state. And these civilizations that used Ormus elements at very specific times in human history also seem to just disappear. No one really knows what happened to some of these potentially advanced civilizations, like the Egyptians is a great example. They were able to build these structures that we still can't replicate, and then we don't know what happened to them. You know, it's almost like they disappeared, and some texts allude to the fact that maybe they actually switched channels. So they've just gone to another frequency, and a huge component of that was consuming these Ormus elements. Again, gold being the highest frequency metal on the planet, if it's put through a alchemical process where it can be turned into a consumable white powder that then changes our frequency. Like if we consume enough of that it changes our frequency, it might actually put us in another reality.
Wow. So the way it works is you take a precious or semi-precious metal, and then or an alchemist transmutes it into something else, and it goes from one state to another that we may or may not have the equipment to detect or even determine if it is a known element or something entirely different. And that substance you end up with, when consumed, has these properties that the ancient cultures reference, yet even with the latest and greatest modern science, we don't even know all of the properties and things that they can do.
Yes.
So how did they create them then? How did they figure this out hundreds or thousands of years ago?
Like my interpretation of that is these formulas, they're passed down through sacred texts, and they're passed down through royal families and secret societies, so that at specific times when consciousness elevates enough, they can represent themselves. And they usually represent themselves through specific people who have done enough work on themselves to decode that hidden message, whether it's in geometry, whether it's in the Bible or the Emerald tablets or some of these sacred texts. And it can also be that can happen in meditation. That can happen multiple ways. So yeah, that's really how I see it, is those formulas represent themselves at very specific times in cycles, so that humanity has that assistance to transcend and activate that birthing of the new earth. So we kind of go through that quantum leap process, that exponential process, which is what we're in now.
Then we'll go on now to a topic that I've discussed several times in the show. It's one of my personal favorite supplements since I discovered it. Not even supplements, just, I guess, substances. And that is a black substance called Shilajit.
Yeah, Shilajit is the most concentrated and potent supplement that I've found on the planet. And I would put it out there, if somebody has something that has more nutrient density per 1,000 milligrams, like, please present it, because I've been wandering around for 15 years, like super focused on finding these wild superfoods, these wild crafted superfoods, and Shilajit ticks all the boxes in such an exponential way. It's like 10x everything else. So when it comes to fulvic acid, humic acid, amino acids, vitamin Bs, triterpenes, enzymes, trace minerals, it is the greatest superfood that I've found thus far.
Yeah, and even just the fulvic and humic acids themselves have really cool properties, unique properties, like allowing you to both detoxify naturally and then absorb more of everything else you're consuming at the same time, because of the way the molecule itself works in the body. And it's one of the only, if not the only, that can do both of those at the same time.
Totally. Yeah. And a beautiful stage that we're in with modern science is we're actually creating multiple clinical studies now on Shilajit, which is confirming a lot of this ancient science that the indigenous people from the East have been writing about for thousands of years. Shilajit's written about in like the canon of medicine and mineralogy, but also just by a lot of people that have healed all kinds of things from Shilajit. And it makes sense because it is so nutrient rich and is providing those building blocks that we discussed earlier at a foundational level for the human biology. And probably an important thing to mention, Nick, is that not all Shilajits are the same. There's Shilajit that costs $30 a kilo, and there's Shilajit that costs $2,000 a kilo. And the differences in nutrients between those two is vast. The $30 a kilo will be a powder out of China that is full of other things and may have been sitting in warehouses for extended periods. And, you know, the $2,000 a kilo is going to be from above 16,000 feet, and it's going to have very high concentrations of those nutrients we've discussed, in particular fulvic acid. Like our Shilajit resin that we get from above 16,000 feet has 88% fulvic acid, which is the highest I've ever seen by a considerable amount. And the other beautiful thing with getting it from those altitudes is there's no nasties. There's no heavy metals. We test every single batch that we get and produce, and there's no bacteria. There's no nasties at all. So that's just another really important thing to mention, is that not all Shilajits are the same. Like, I mean, there's people mining it at like sea level now in Somalia and things like that, which is disappointing to the market. But it's also an opportunity for people just to do their research and their due diligence. It's like everything, right? When something has such a high value, there'll always be people trying to take advantage of that and cut it. Or, rose oil is another great one. It's to get pure rose oil is very difficult because you can cut it so many times and you can still smell it. So people don't necessarily know. But pure rose oil will actually harden below 18 degrees Celsius. So it's a good little trick. If someone's trying to sell you pure rose oil, you can throw it in the fridge for 5 minutes, and if it crystallizes, it's fairly pure.
Yeah, whenever I come across something, especially a substance that's used across different cultures that didn't know each other, that never made contact, so they didn't necessarily trade it, but they used it and they revered it, such as Shilajit, I always take notice. And when I was doing my research, looking into what the modern science says on it, it's clear that there's still a long ways to go in discovering all of the potentials and the different important considerations when buying it, because I came across like fables and nicknames of what the different tribes and peoples would call it, such as the destroyer of weakness and the nectar of the gods and a bunch of others. I'm sure you've heard some of those also.
Totally, yeah. An indigenous name for it, Mama Joe. So blood of the mountain is another one. But we found like it's incredible for energy. It's incredible for brain performance as a nootropic for focus. Incredible for fertility. Like the amount of people that have started taking Manna and haven't been able to get, like they've been trying to get pregnant for years, and they've both been taking it for a month and they've fallen pregnant. It's like a consistent thing, which from our perspective makes total sense, because again, we're fertilizing the blood and giving the body charge. So all of those are sexual organs, as well as all of the other organs, and all of the repair and recovery and energy and collagen, whether it's the bones, the skin, the tendons, the ligaments, they're all coming back online. So we use a fun tagline that's called "Turning You On," because Shilajit is known to give you a lot of libido as well. But we're really saying like turning on the electromagnetic system again. We're bringing it back online, which the result of that's more energy, fertility, all of those things. So nothing really surprises us with Shilajit because of what's in it and the way that we look at nutrition from that first principles perspective. The trick with it has always been it's hard to get. The good stuff's expensive. It doesn't taste so good. And then it's in this like thick, gooey resin that's just really tricky to work with. So that's why we've spent 5 years in R&D on our packaging and on our sachets to make our customers' lives easier and save them a lot of time by putting it in these little sachets where they can just snap one into either water or their favorite nut milk every day. And, it takes 5 seconds, and then you can enjoy all of those benefits of Shilajit without it being kind of clunky and cumbersome.
Yes. And when I was doing my research into Shilajit, I also noticed what you were saying, that it has like 15 different names depending on the culture that was using it. So looking up each of those and finding the research on each of those names is a challenge in and of itself. But also, I realized that the way it's processed makes a huge difference. Like the highest quality stuff is often not processed in a very fast, like high heat kind of way. It's used using the sun. And that makes me think that if I was to use Manna Vitality, and I would not want to add that to coffee or a hot drink, because then I'd be destroying or at least degrading some of the like precious compounds and things inside of it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. As I mentioned, Shilajit has multiple enzymes and also triterpenes inside of it, as well as all the other micronutrients. They have a life force. So I don't recommend boiling that life force, which is effectively removing the life force. If you want to add it to a hot drink, you can just wait for it to cool down a bit. Again, I'm in Celsius, so often you can wait for your coffee to kind of come back down to like 50 or 60. Then you can add it and stir it. I usually stir it with a wooden spoon, both directions, a couple of times, and you can enjoy it that way. I mean, the flavor profile is still quite intense. So for people that love the flavor of tea or coffee, I would recommend having it as a separate drink. We've worked a lot on the flavor profile. Of some people, it's still strong. But what I've found is really good is with any nut milk. So my favorite's macadamia or coconut. For whatever reason, that really masks a lot of that strong, earthy Shilajit flavor. And that's how the indigenous actually used to take it a lot of the time as well, was with milk.
Yeah. So that was actually one of my observations. I've been using Shilajit for years, and then you can't really see, the lighting isn't great, but this is Manna Vitality right here. And the first time I had it, I immediately was struck that this doesn't taste like that really strong, intense flavor of Shilajit that isn't the most appealing, if I'm honest. It's tough to stomach, but this is much lighter. It's almost like the difference between a thick coffee and a tea. Not in terms of like the taste, whether it's nice or bad or whatever, but it's just like it's more mild. It's much more palatable, and I could see myself sipping on this and enjoying it without adding anything to it. Versus Shilajit, I need to add other stuff to it to mask it because it's very unpleasant.
Yeah, and we've worked really hard to get the concentration of Shilajit and ocean plasma and Ormus that's in those sachets palatable. So we have 1,000 milligrams of the most concentrated Shilajit on the planet in each one of those packets. If you were to taste the Shilajit by itself without the flavor profile that we've come up with, it's quite hard to stomach. It's so intense. And same with the ocean plasma. So there's 20 drops of ocean plasma in there, or 1,000 milligrams. If you were just to put one drop on your tongue, you'd probably never, ever do it again. The charge is so potent. It's really, 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 really powerful. So it's been a process for us to be able to make this product palatable. And we're really happy with it now. We've changed manufacturers, manufacturing processes a couple of times in the last couple of months, basically because we moved from Europe to the US. But now we've really dialed in that flavor profile, and we've got our manufacturing process dialed in. So we're super excited with our ability to not just mask those strong flavors, but actually make the flavor exalting for the body. And it's been a real alchemical process to make that happen. And all of our flavoring is from organic farms. It's beautiful products like natural vanilla, and organic cinnamon bark. There's a bunch of others in there that I won't mention, but yeah, it's really important to make things taste palatable too, right?
Yeah. I realized that until just now, I had never actually looked at the other ingredients section of your product label, because I figure if you're willing to go to the highest parts of Earth and extract the superfoods from there, then go to the lowest parts and bring together all these things and process it the right way, which takes time, you're definitely not going to be taking a shortcut and using a cheap, synthetic, unhealthy flavoring agent just to ruin the product like that.
Definitely not. And it's worth mentioning. So Brad and myself being based in Australia, when we went through the labeling, it was advised by a regulatory agency to put the word natural flavors on the back to represent our vanilla and cinnamon and a couple of the other ones that are organic from a very specific farm. And we thought that natural flavors would mean natural flavors. We didn't realize that in America, it was a way of basically saying there's unnatural things in there. So we were pretty devastated when we found that out. We'd produced like 50,000 product boxes. So we have made that change. We no longer have natural flavors written on our box because it's inaccurate. All of our ingredients, to your point, including our flavoring, is organic from the farms where we know what practices they're going through. So that's now replicated on all of our future packaging. So if anyone has a box that says natural flavors, that was an innocent mistake. We actually thought natural flavors would mean that.
I can see how you get confused by that. What are some of the stories you hear from users? Like, what are some of the common anecdotes or things that they remark? I know you said fertility was one. What else?
Yeah, really, like energy is the main one. And like I said before as well, focus. So people, before workouts or before whatever they're doing with their busy day, they'll take Manna and notice like that they get that extra lift. So that's the main feedback that we get. People really within that first couple of days notice a difference in their stamina, in their performance, or in their daily functioning. Over time, we notice like significant health improvements. So a lot of the clinical studies, after 3 months, again, because we're fertilizing that blood, so it'll improve injuries because you're getting blood flow with those minerals. Those minerals will start going back into the bone marrow. So our bone marrow has often been depleted because that's the great storehouse of like stem cells and minerals. But our fluids will pull those minerals out of there if we're depleted. So we're like remineralizing the bone marrow. And, you know, the result of some of these things is really people that have got chronic issues write into us and say like whatever they've been struggling from is gone. And again, that's what was reported by in these texts by people using either Shilajit or Ormus back in the day. It was curing people from all kinds of different things. So again, it just makes total sense based off what's in the substances.
And I love how simple it is to use too. It's not like every 3 hours, take these 10 capsules and then add this to water, mix it for 30 minutes and then let it sit and then drink it. It's like, no, just once a day in the morning. That's when you recommend taking it, I assume, because some people get energy from it. You just add this one sachet to water or your preferred drink, sip on it. It tastes pretty good for what it is. And then that's it. It's not any more complex or complicated than that.
That's it. And we get a lot of people saying, you know, can we take 3 or 4 sachets a day? And you can. It's not like you can take too much. However, we've designed it so that you do only need one. Again, it's a very generous dosage, in particular of Shilajit, like 1,000 milligrams. Most other people in the market will sell, anywhere from 100 milligrams a dose up to 250. I think the other largest one we've ever seen is 500. So, we're double or quadruple or 10x those other dosages. Again, just so that you don't have to keep taking things, you can take one a day and you get everything you need.
Yeah. And so that doesn't matter if, like, whenever I see instructions to take one, I usually take two, just because I'm a bigger person and I like to push the limits. But I'd assume that even though I'm, say, 210 pounds, 6'3", I'm not going to convert that into the metric, but I wouldn't need to take more than someone else just because I'm a little bigger, or someone who's smaller, they'd be fine taking a full thing, even though they might be half my size.
Yeah, I mean, as a maintenance, one a day is fantastic. And if you wanted to prepare for something or train for something because of your size, then you could take two a day. I know Brad, who's the other founder of Manna, Brad McDonnell, he was taking three a day for 3 months, and he was checking his blood. So during that period, he doubled his testosterone, and everything else in his life was the same.
David, we're running low on time. We could obviously talk for hours about this. Lots more to continue, but we will start to wind this one down. I have a couple more questions for you about the product and how to best use it, and then we will call it a day. Are there any stacks or protocols or things you like to combine with it, or you've heard of users combining with it for better results, whether it's red light therapy, it's sun exposure, it's hot or cold contrast therapy, you name it?
Yeah, it's back to how we started the conversation, Nick, and it's really getting up in the morning. I like to just be thankful. Like, we've got another day here, right? Just to exist is so precious, and it takes so much from the universe for us to exist here. So, yeah, starting with gratitude, starting with a big glass of structured water, adding the mana into that, and then going for a walk in nature. That's how I love to start the day. And then if you can go for a swim in the ocean or in fresh water, if you can get some sunlight, if you're into exercise and you want to go to the gym or access those other modalities, whether it's cold therapy, red light therapy, any of those things, I think they're beautiful practices. I always go towards nature instead of going into buildings. But that's not an option for everybody. So I think, if you can't get natural sunlight, which has red light obviously in it, then getting some red light therapy is wonderful. Just keeping it simple, brother. It's like, the simple free things, they're all there. As far as supplementation, I don't take anything else on a consistent basis. Sometimes I'll take a really good multivitamin. Yesterday, I actually went and got an activated complex B vitamin because I felt like taking some vitamin B. I've been on a more vegetarian diet and just felt like my body needed some more B vitamins. But usually it's just really good water, it's minerals, and it's sunlight.
Okay, David. Well, if people want to follow your work, to connect with you, to give Manna Vitality a shot, how do they go about that?
Yeah, mannavitality.com is the website, and everything else is there. So on the homepage at the bottom, you can access socials, or you can go into the About section and watch some of the most recent podcasts. So yeah, you can find everything online at mannavitality.com.
And you were nice enough to give my audience a code. So if you guys use the code URBAN, that'll save you, I believe it's 10% on your order. Okay, David, if there was a worldwide burning of the books and all knowledge on earth is lost, but you get to save the works of 3 teachers, who would you pick and why? And these can have to do with Ormus or marine minerals or Shilajit or something completely different.
I love the question. I would have to say Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, and Nassim Haramein. Yeah, reason being is they've gone deep enough inside themselves to find a truth that the expression of the truth that they've found has such an impact on humanity, on humanity's like freedom, abundance, and like harmony. Like, all of their discoveries is around this fact that we're all connected. There's this unification amongst all things. We all come from the same source and return back to the same source. And even when we're in these appeared separate vessels, we're still connected in this very magical and mysterious way. But once we remember that truth and operate from that space, there's a level of like kindness and care and harmony that will present on the earth so that it's literally a heaven on earth situation for many more people than it is now. And to me, that's a great opportunity that these scientists that were really mystics are trying to share with us.
That's one that I hear a lot, and it sounds great, and I feel like I embody it sometimes until I get cut off in traffic, and it's very quick. I'm very quick to forget that we're all connected in a number of different ways. David, you've mentioned several times structuring water. Are there any devices you like, or are you having access to a local stream or somewhere where you're getting naturally structured water?
Yeah, I always recommend spring water with a pH of 7 or just above. Again, nature's the greatest alchemist. And if it's producing out of the ground in a spring, then that's for a reason. If you don't have access to spring water, you can structure it yourself with a vortex device. I built my own. However, you can Google, there's a couple of good ones out there. I think Nikken still do a good one called Revitalizer or something like that. But it's a Nikken product. And you know what? If you want to do it for free, you can get a big glass of water or a jug, and you can get a wooden spoon and stir it, giving gratitude, putting some intention in the water, stir it the other direction. So stir it in both directions just for like a minute. And that will actually structure your water. Your water loves to dance, so it loves to spin, it loves to vortex, and you can do it by hand.
Does it help to put light, specifically infrared, in front of the water to help it structure better, faster, more efficiently?
If you wanted to add light for a period to water, I would always use sunlight. Sunlight has all of the lights in it. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. And water is imprintable as well, so it also loves high frequency substances. So if you've got any precious gems, any precious metals, any crystals, water will love that. But probably the most precious gem, crystal, and metal is the human body. So if you can bless your water and have reverence for that expression, for that sacred element, and realizing that when we consume it, it's, that just feeling into that process, I feel like that's the greatest thing we can do for our water is actually be in gratitude for it ourselves and develop that relationship with the consumption of it.
David, any final thoughts, any action items you want listeners to leave here with today?
Yeah, I just really wanted to thank you, Nick. I feel your devotion in researching the products, and I can feel that you've done a lot of research from the conversation that we're able to have into minerals and into health and nutrition. So it's people like you sharing the good news and actually talking about the truth that will kind of bypass a lot of the marketing stories that people can just throw a bunch of money at, and there's not really anything in the product. So yeah, thanks for everything you're doing, brother. It's been beautiful to connect with you over the last couple of weeks, and have a great time in your little trip that you're on, and hopefully we can connect soon in person. I get over to Austin quite a bit because, a lot of our team's there now. So it'd be great to catch up in person and share some mana.
Yeah, certainly. Sometimes I feel a bit crazy getting so excited about something like minerals because I feel like I'm the only one into this kind of thing. And then I come across people like you who are doing awesome work out there. And so thank you for putting this together, making it a coherent thought and sharing it with the world, because without people like you, people like me also wouldn't be diving as far into the mineral and other rabbit holes that I like to pursue. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing a mono with you in Austin here or over there on your side of the pond down the line at some point.
Yeah, me too.
All right, David, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick. Really appreciate it. And yeah, chat soon.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.